Now, what is really going on? Okay, I'm concerned with how it's going. Let me see. Moving away from the U.S. dollar as their basis of international trade. Let me just tell you, China and Brazil and Russia are the three main players in this. They already don't use the U.S. dollar as their basis of international trade. Russia has its own currency, so does China, and so does Brazil.
Friends, it always stuns me how many brilliant, eloquent, and especially successful experts we have in the United States in all sorts of fields, including financial, who really, really know the United States extremely well and are brilliant people, but as soon as the question comes up of something that's happening over the border, they know nothing. And unfortunately, about this issue, I'm stunned. As soon as I watched this video, my mind was blown. Because Dave Ramsey has to know about the Bretton Woods system and the fact that, well, one of the reasons the United States can have $32 trillion of debt or whatever, and engage in such massive spending, sort of hedging against the future, is because of the Bretton Woods system, because the entire world after World War II, especially after Stalin died, was using the dollar almost and entirely exclusively for international trade. That's why all these countries were always buying these U.S. treasuries and all that stuff over the years. I don't know where he's coming from, making the argument that, like, well, Russia has its own currency and China does and Brazil does and they always have, so nothing has changed. No! The global reserve currency status of the dollar is eroding before our eyes. Something very major is changing that will have an effect on the United States.
What these particular, the three largest countries, and they're talking about bringing in some of the oil countries as well in the Middle East, are doing is they're trying to come up with one currency that they all use, and then that would be in international trade converted back and forth to dollars. Much like Europe did with the euro, which, by the way, kind of didn't work.
I don't think comparing what they're trying to do in the BRICS nations is actually comparable to the euro. And again, I'm kind of stunned that Dave doesn't understand this. One of the big rumors of how this is going to work out is they kind of want to take like the value of the biggest top five currencies of said BRICS countries, and then maybe the value of like the top 20 commodities that creates a sort of math equation that creates basically a generic like currency value that essentially no one controls, okay? Well, one of the other options is going to gold, which is, again, something that can be a bit manipulated, but ultimately no single group of people can control. Essentially, what they want to do is to step away from central banking. That, again, is very big and very different from what the European Union tried to do. Again, I don't get it, Dave. You are a super ultra multimillionaire. You're a financial genius when it comes to inside the United States. But dude, you've dropped the ball on this one, my southern friend.
And the euro is traded all over Europe, and they did away with their basic currency. And now the U.S. is just going to have, it's a one world currency. It's the end times of revelation. And this is what comes up, right? Okay. But all it is these countries, if they did all agree to use one currency, it'd be much like when Europe went to the euro, and then that's going to exchange for the dollar back and forth. Are those countries going to be able to devalue the dollar by doing that? No.
But the entire world already did agree to using a single currency, at least for international trade and as a reserve currency, the dollar. This sort of already happened. It's weird. Even his viewers are seeing this as having a global currency, something on the horizon, where it's something that pretty much all of us have experienced throughout all of our lives, unless somehow we were old enough to fight in World War II or something. I just don't get it. About other countries being able to devalue the dollar. If he means make the dollar in the United States completely worthless, obviously not. The United States is big, it has a lot of people in it, it has a lot of the things in it, it has a lot of businesses and this, that, and the other still, despite some recent problems over, let's just say, the post-communist years. But the thing is that will it chip away at the value of the dollar? Yes, because as the dollar is losing its world reserve currency status, that means it's going to have to play by the same rules as certain countries like, say, Mexico, or in an extreme instance, Zimbabwe. If the United States can't really just print its way out of troubled situations because it has this amazing world reserve currency status where the whole world needs dollars, then the United States is going to have to learn to live much more simply. In fact, they're going to have to follow Dave Ramsey's Every Dollar Daily Planner app rules because without more simpler living, the United States is going to be in a lot of inflation trouble.
Because while they do take up a lot of land mass, they do not take up a lot of the gross domestic product of the world. The United States still is the vast majority of the gross domestic product of the world. Still, China is big. Russia is basically horrible. And Brazil is a failed economy like times 10 and is tiny as far as economics go.
You know, if this was 1991, I'd completely agree with Dave. But you have to think about, when it comes to statistics, there's always different metrics by which you can measure things. Yeah, in GDP, the West always seems to come out the big winner. But if you measure things in PPP, as there's been in a few different articles, then essentially Russia and China and the entirety of the West are actually about equal, with Russia and China starting to break away and become the leaders of the pack. So it really depends on your metrics, man. And we also have to remember that we heard from certain politicians that Russia is a nation with the economy of Spain and a gas station. It's a gas station masquerading as a country with a pathetic army, and it's corrupt and this, that, and the other. And its force of mercenaries just crushed NATO's most powerful army, with full support from every NATO nation, all the big guns and big goodies. And Russia is economically going on an upspike in the middle of a war, whereas the West seems to be tumbling downward. So it's kind of like, dude, it really depends on, basically, statistics allow you to paint whatever picture you want and justify it, and I don't think that his view of the world is very up to date. Again, Dave seems to be very happy in 1991, and I don't blame him. Things were much better back then for America.
Now, what they are going to do, if they all do put it together, it's not a de-dollarization. It's not doing away with the dollar. They've created their own currency. They're still going to have to trade with the 800-pound gorilla, which be us.
Now, this is where I totally agree with Dave. The United States is kind of too big to fail, too big to ignore, and so, yes, foreign countries are going to need to trade with the United States in dollars. So that's definitely going to happen. The dollar is going to have some international value. Comparing the United States, again, jokingly to Zimbabwe, which doesn't have a whole heck of a lot of international trade, is kind of an unfair little jab on my part. But, yeah, I think on this part, Dave is right, but he doesn't seem to see the bigger picture.
I mean, when you look at the math, it's humorous. I mean, and Russia, we always think of as like, you know, in the Rocky movies or something, like they're going to come bomb the United States or whatever and all this stuff. But when you look at even though it's a huge landmass, their economic production is pitiful. It's pitiful because communism sucks. And so it just doesn't create a lot of gross domestic product.
This is absolutely mind-blowing. This man who runs what I think he said somewhere in the $10 million a year, maybe more, business. This man who has helped thousands of people get out of poverty, raise themselves up based on logical financial planning. A guy I think who's done a lot of good for the United States and people across the United States, doesn't know that communism is dead here. In Russia, communism died at the end of 1991. It's gone. In fact, Russia uses a very similar sort of economic approach that a lot of libertarians would like, especially if you talk about working for yourself. The laws about working for yourself as an individually employed entrepreneur in Russia are probably the best in the world. Download the app to your phone, write a check to every person who needs your service, pay 4% taxes. That's how Russia works. Russia actually kind of has the economic system that a lot of Republican voters would want to have in America, but they're still stuck with this nutso madness that there's communism here. Communism in Russia is stone cold dead.
Because when I first started, there was like a conspiracy theory that the world was...
You've seen them all at this point.
You know, there's a guy, here's one. I was telling a friend of mine, a friend of mine was asking me about this the other day, and I said, my answer to him was, I read a book in 1982 called Bankruptcy 1984. It was predicting the end of the U.S. economy in 1984. It was written by an economist that was brilliant named Peter Grace. He was in charge of the Grace Commission in the Reagan administration. And they were studying the increasing national debt and that the national debt was going to cause the economy to collapse, which I think the national debt's stupid and out of control, okay? But this guy said it's going to hockey stick and the monetary policy is going to turn upside down. We've sucked all the cash out, used it for government stuff, and the economy's got no cash to operate on, and so it's going to collapse in 1984. apparently wrong.
Now, even though I'm criticizing the guy in this video, I overall think he's doing very good things for American society, okay? So that's cool. And to be honest, I really like this little sort of side note that he added because throughout my lifetime, I've said this, I've heard the same thing. I was born in the beginning of the 80s, and for my entire life, I've heard about how the economy is going to collapse, this, that, and the other. And Dave's story about how these people put together these very well-researched books that show that the economy will hockey stick and or the debt will hockey stick and America will be destroyed. They wrote these books maybe a bit emotionally. They probably actually sort of wrote the reality that they wanted because they're these sort of doomsayer type of people who are maybe find the idea of this apocalyptic crash to be interesting. But they backed it up with a bunch of statistics. But I've also read every year articles from major mainstream news sources that seem very well researched with very good facts and statistics that the Russian economy is going to collapse. In fact, there's articles about that every year of Putin's leadership. And they continue to write about how Russia's a poor country and nothing here works and this, that, and the other. And I just ask you, Dave, if there are people within the United States who have written books about how the United States is doomed to collapse in 2 years, and they based it on real statistics information, and yet they're completely wrong, maybe the same type of people write the same type of information about Russia and China and the BRICS countries are doing exactly the same thing, and they're equally as completely wrong, even if they have some fancy statistics. That's all I ask, Dave. That's all I ask is just to consider one fact. For 5 seconds of your very long life, just take some time and consider that fact. That's all I want out of you, pal. Anyways, Tim Kirby Russia, signing out. So anyways, guys, if you enjoyed this video and you like the opinions coming out of my big fat mouth, then join up on my Telegram channel. That's Tim Kirby Hardcore on Telegram. Link, of course, in the description.